Hello folks, and welcome to this video in which we're going to have a look at this Kent and East Sussex Ford Railbus. So the KESR was run by Colonel Stevens, who was particularly famous for his parsimoniousness, shall we say, and this is one of the results of that. So in about 1922, late 1922, one of these arrived, or a set of these arrived on the Kent and East Sussex Railway. So it's based off a Ford Model T lorry chassis, fitted with a bus body, and was designed to run as cheaply as possible really for the passenger services on that line. Just to give you an example of how cheap, they decided to run two of these cars back to back in normal operation because that was cheaper than fitting a reverse gear to one of them. This particular example is in a fictional livery and is built from my kit for it, which was again in true Colonel Stevens fashion designed to be as cheap as possible. So the motor just costs a couple of pounds, it's some very cheap plastic gears in here, it's two-wheel drive, it's got some fairly standard easy to use pickups on it, and the body and chassis are 3D printed in several parts. So, to take you through the construction, we're going to go back in time a little bit, several months actually, because it's taken me far too long to do the final few touches on this, but we'll be back later on. And this is what the finished version looks like, very, very lightly weathered in this fictional livery. Now I have to forgive all the junk on this modelling desk for this section of the video. Although if you don't, you're probably not a regular viewer of this channel, so hello. Anyway, before I move on with this, I thought it's probably best just to show some of the inside, because it's part built at the moment, before I stick the inside in. Essentially, this bit's going to slot in here, but I want to put some glass in for the windows, or plastic in this case, but that's going to have to go in afterwards and I'm not going to be able to get this back out. So I'm going to do this bit now while it's part built and then explain the rest later, I think. Maybe. Who knows? If you're watching this, then that's exactly what I've done. Anyway, so let's have a look at the inside and try and bring my light over. There we go. So the motor sits in its little slot here. There's a tiny blob of super glue just sort of about there on the underside that's holding that in place. I could pull that out fairly easily if I wanted to. That has had the motor shaft shortened and the gear fitted, although actually the gear was fitted first and then the motor shaft was shortened with the gear on it, because the shortening sort of takes about a third of the gear off as well. You can do that with a razor saw. I used a Dremel, doesn't really matter. I painted the other gear black, fitted it onto the axle and fitted the axle into the back, although you do have to be fairly careful because these bits are very, very thin and snap quite easily. So the pickups are fitted. There's one DCC Concepts one at the back here, two Allen Gibson sprung plunger type ones at the front. That's because these ones have a slightly less sort of friction and there's not a whole lot of weight over these wheels. So then for them to be able to turn they need very, very low friction pickups. So the way these are all wired in, you could also use your own pickups of course. I just find it easier to use pre-made ones. I don't have to fiddle around with lots of tiny bits of brass, although I did have to fiddle around with lots of tiny bits of brass to do these. Anyway, so the wiring. I've got a piece of fairly flexible, I think this is 26 gauge wire, you could probably use 28 or even smaller. Stripped about 20 centimetres off the end of one and soldered that top of that stripped section to the back of the motor and poked the rest down through the hole Don't know how well you can see the hole there, so that it's sort of sticking out the bottom here. Soldered that onto the motor first, did the same for the other side. So I've got two bits sticking out the bottom, and then soldered them to the pickups and then trim them to length. That's the easiest way I think of doing this. Otherwise you have to sort of second guess all the lengths and so on. So just cut the wires over long, strip a good decent chunk off, stick them through and then cut down the excess. At that point you can unfold the wire over. It's one single piece of wire I'm using for each side here. This is so I don't have to try and solder two things and hold two things onto here at the same time, because that's going to be really, really difficult. So yeah, that long section of wire is folded over, shoved through the hole, tacked here, here and here with super glue so it doesn't get stuck in the mechanism. Left over long, soldered on, and then cut back short again. And I think that's pretty much all I need to say while it's in this state before I put the rest together. It's always worth checking to make sure the interior actually fits before you just close all that out for good. But yeah, other than that, back to the more finished version. So there we have it, that's how this Railbus was built. It does run. I'm going to show you some video of that in a few seconds time. And if you are interested in getting hold of one of these kits, they're a little bit fiddly to put together in places, as you probably saw in that section of the video. So I'm not sort of officially offering these, but if you want a set of prints and a few bits and pieces, I can certainly make those for you. Do please get in touch with the details in the description of this video.